On February 24th, 2022, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, expecting a swift and decisive victory within just 3 days. The narrative was clear. Russia's military, considered the second most powerful in the world, would sweep through Ukraine with ease. But 3 years later, the reality tells a very different story. Russia controls only about 20% of Ukrainian territory, and the cost has been staggering. Nearly 1 million Russian casualties. That's more than the US suffered in 2 decades of war in Afghanistan and Iraq, all compressed into just 3 years. Welcome to WarPath. Today we're breaking down why the idea that Russia is winning this war is an illusion. We'll look at the territory, the manpower crisis, the economic collapse, the propaganda, and the growing concerns that Russia itself may not survive the consequences of Putin's catastrophic miscalculation. Let's start with the numbers. According to the Institute for the Study of War, in 2024, Russia captured around 4,200 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, mostly in the Donetsk region. That's an area slightly larger than Rhode Island, but only about 0.6% of Ukraine's total landmass. To put that in perspective, Forbes crunched the numbers and found that at the current pace, if Ukraine maintains its defensive posture and Russia doesn't dramatically escalate, it would take Russia 230 years to occupy the rest of Ukraine. And they'd need roughly 100 million casualties to do it, against a population of just 144 million. That's not a strategy, that's a slow-moving disaster. But territory is only part of the picture. The human cost is staggering. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense reports nearly 975,000 Russian casualties since the invasion began. Even conservative Western estimates, like those from the UK Ministry of Defense, put the number above 750,000. To understand how massive that is, consider this. Russia lost about 15,000 soldiers in its decade-long war in Afghanistan. In Ukraine, they've lost more than 60 times that in just 3 years. And it gets worse. Russia was already facing a demographic crisis before the war. A declining birth rate, an aging population, and a shrinking workforce have plagued the country since the Soviet collapse. Now, on top of that, nearly 920,000 working-age men have fled the country to avoid conscription. That's nearly 2 million people removed from Russia's economy and society in just 3 years. Russia is quite simply running out of people to throw into this war. To understand how Russia got here, we have to go back to the beginning. Russian military planners were so confident of a quick victory that troops were reportedly issued parade uniforms. Combat plans assumed Ukraine would collapse immediately. But that didn't happen. Instead, Russia got bogged down in the longest conventional war in Europe since World War II. Its air force failed to gain superiority. Its tank columns were decimated by drones and anti-tank weapons. Elite units were wiped out, forcing Russia to rely on poorly trained conscripts, convicts, and foreign mercenaries. A September 2024 report from the Center for Strategic and International Studies called Russia's planning one of the biggest intelligence failures of the 21st century. The French Institute of International Relations echoed that sentiment, noting that Russia abandoned its own logistical protocols because it didn't think the war would last more than a few weeks. The result? Severe supply shortages, poor coordination, and a complete lack of adaptability. After Ukraine repelled the initial assault, most notably at Hostomel Airport, the war became a grinding war of attrition. And in that kind of war, Russia is not winning. On paper, Russia still ranks as the world's 11th largest economy, but peel back the layers and the picture is grim. Western sanctions have crippled its banking system, isolated it from global markets, and crushed its high-tech sectors. By the end of 2024, the ruble had lost 23% of its value against the US dollar, with daily fluctuations creating economic chaos. More alarming, Russia now spends about 40% of its government budget on defense, a level that no modern economy can sustain. A third of that spending is hidden under classified projects, reflecting the Kremlin's paranoia and its need to maintain the illusion of control. And here's the kicker. Russia's main source of income, energy exports, is in long-term decline. The EU has cut its reliance on Russian gas by over 30% since 2022. Oil sales to China and India come at steep discounts. With energy making up 30 to 50% of government revenue, Russia's workforce is increasingly concentrated in a single industry. Manufacturing now depends heavily on imports, especially from China, and the country is forced to import labor just to meet basic demands. So, what are Russia's options? None of them are good. Option 1, massive escalation, including the possible use of tactical nuclear weapons. Some hardliners in the Kremlin have pushed for this, but it would backfire catastrophically. A nuclear strike might create short-term tactical gains, but it would trigger a NATO response and plunge the world into a nuclear confrontation. And even if Russia nuked Kyiv, it would destroy the very land and people it claims to want. Ukraine's population, around 40 million, is exactly what Russia needs to fix its demographic collapse. Bombing them into oblivion solves nothing. Option 2, withdrawal from Ukraine. This would be a devastating political defeat for Putin, whose regime has staked its legitimacy on this war. A retreat without achieving core objectives would likely trigger elite infighting and possibly even regime collapse. Putin's power is a house of cards, built on the illusion of strength. If that illusion shatters, so does his grip on power. Option 3, a peace deal. This seems the most rational, but neither side can agree on terms. Ukraine, after 3 years of fierce resistance, has little incentive to give up territory. President Zelensky insists on full territorial restoration, including Crimea, and demands NATO security guarantees. Russia, meanwhile, cannot accept any deal that doesn't legitimize its conquests. US politics have further complicated diplomacy. In early 2025, President Trump proposed a peace plan that would have ceded significant Ukrainian territory to Russia, contradicting his own State Department's position. The move strained US-Ukraine relations and stalled peace efforts. Even temporary ceasefires have failed. A 30-hour Easter truce was broken by Russia nearly 3,000 times, according to Ukraine. So, Russia is trapped. It can't win militarily, it won't accept defeat, and it can't negotiate a way out. Now, let's look at the bigger picture. What has Russia actually achieved with this war? Before the invasion, NATO was an alliance in search of purpose. Today, it's stronger and more united than ever. Finland and Sweden have joined, doubling NATO's border with Russia. Germany has ramped up defense spending. Poland is building the largest army in Europe. Sweden and Finland are pushing their defense industries to the limit, partnering with US and UK firms to produce advanced weapons. Diplomatically, Russia has gone from a difficult but respected global power to an international pariah. Its largest trading partner is now China, a country that can pressure Russia for resource access and undermine its policies with impunity. All of this stems from one fundamental miscalculation: the gap between Russia's perceived military strength and its actual performance. Before the war, Russia was ranked second only to the US in military power. Analysts pointed to its 1.3 million active troops, 6,000 tanks, and 4,000 aircraft. Parades showcased the T-14 Armada, Su-57, and hypersonic missiles. But when the invasion began, none of that mattered. Instead, we saw elite paratroopers dropped into Hostomel without support. Armored columns ran out of fuel. Tanks advanced without infantry and were destroyed by drones. Russia resorted to human wave tactics straight out of World War I. Museum-piece T-62 and T-55 tanks appeared on the front lines. Even the supposedly advanced T-90M tanks were found with fake reactive armor blocks filled with sand. Pilots taped commercial GPS units to their dashboards. The T-14 Armada pulled from the front after a brief appearance, either too fragile or too expensive to lose. The Su-57, used only for long-range strikes from inside Russian airspace. How did Russian leadership misjudge so badly? The answer lies in the nature of Putin's regime. Russian intelligence believed Ukraine would collapse and its people would welcome Russian troops. That wasn't just a military error. It was a failure to understand reality, fueled by the very propaganda machine Putin built to stay in power. As former Kremlin advisor Gleb Pavlovsky said in 2022, nobody realized just how maniacally obsessed Putin was with Ukraine. We underestimated the decay of the Russian government. That decay runs deep. Corruption is endemic. Training exercises are staged. Equipment maintenance exists only on paper. And Russia's military doctrine, built around defending against NATO, was never designed for a war of aggression. Its top-down command structure, meant to shore up defenses, has instead enabled corruption and power consolidation under Putin. If Russia continues to lose momentum, Putin himself could be at risk. He would be blamed for the disaster, and power-hungry elites might move to remove him. But, as Brookings notes, there's no clear successor. The entire regime might not survive a leadership change. And that opens the door to a broader collapse. It could happen in stages: economic breakdown first, as defense spending crowds out everything else and infrastructure fails. Then political fragmentation, with regional governors asserting more autonomy. Then military disintegration, as poorly trained units lose cohesion and desert. Finally, central authority collapses. Moscow loses control over large parts of Russia. The Federation could break apart like Yugoslavia or the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Moscow and St. Petersburg might try to hold on to the nuclear arsenal and claim succession, but mass emigration would surge toward the EU. And China could move into resource-rich Siberia, claiming territory to fuel its industry. So next time someone tells you Russia is winning in Ukraine, remember this. After 3 years of a war that was supposed to last days, Russia controls just 20% of Ukraine. It has suffered nearly 1 million casualties. Its economy is in shambles. Its international standing is destroyed. Its enemies are stronger than ever. And it has no clear path to victory. Russia isn't winning. It's trapped in a disaster of its own making, with no good options and no way out. What do you think? Thanks for watching WarPath. Leave your comments below.